All right. Good day, everyone. I would like to welcome each of our viewers and listeners to this latest edition of our Clear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce City Connections program. And today we have as our guest the mayor of League City, which I believe is the largest city, the largest municipality in Galveston County.
Yep.
And so we're going to spend a little time talking to the mayor about League City and some of its issues and what's going on there, what might be important for our stakeholders and our business community here at the Chamber. And Mayor Hallisey, Pat Hallisey, why don't you give us just a little background, a little of your background and how and why you decided to become mayor?
Well, great story. I've been mayor twice, so I'll try to give it to you from the top. I got into public service in 1974, 75 when I came to League City. My first chore was director of parks. What I found from public service was a broader group to talk to. I first came to the Clear Lake area in 1964 when I went into high school. I didn't go to school here. I went to South Houston High School, but I'd been a swimmer, and there were people that were down here that were promoting that. And, you know, they brought me down and let me swim up and down the pool so some of the kids could see, you know, what he perceived how it ought to be done. And while I was still in college, I came down here in 69 and 70 while I was still there, and I coached in Nassau Bay and El Lago and, you know, got involved with the year-round program. But in that process, also, before I came down here I moved back out to West Texas and took a job coaching at Permian High School and, you know, had a good time out, great people. But if you wanted to know what was lower than whale poop on the bottom of the ocean, be the swimming coach at the #1 football school anywhere in the country. But it was a learning experience that there was something other in life than just me. But that's okay. Made a lot of friends, had a good time, came back here in 75 and went to work for the city. And that's where I started in the parks business. And I did that until 81. You know, I'd gotten to be such a big shot that, you know, I thought what I had to say was every bit as important as anybody else. And they sent me packing by 1979. And I ended up down in Galveston County, had a great career down there, put a lot of facilities on the ground and, you know, got to meet some really interesting people. But toward the end of my time down there, and as Bob remembers, I was at war with a member of the commissioner's court, and it was getting to be time to get out of there. It just was too much carrying on. And I started looking at if I was going to have an impact, how could I do that? And the first place I started was county judge in 1993 and 94. And I thought, you know, this is a good place to start. He gets to, whoever holds the beans has the power, was my theory in those days. And I ran on a good record, and Jim Yarborough ran at the same time. He won. Nice guy. We remained friends through all of that. But, you know, when that was over, they called me from League City. The mayor had some problems, and Chester Davis, who was an old friend of mine, he was an old timer in town, called and said, you know, if I can put a package together to get you to be the new mayor after Joe leaves without an election, would you take it? And I said, well, yeah, I would, but I'm hesitant about that. I was pretty aggressive in those days of what I wanted to do. And I knew that city government was the kiss of death. You don't go in, you only make half the people happy, the other half are mad at you. But I came back. And I only spent 6 months here, made a lot of substantial changes. And, you know, in those days, I hate to say it like this, but I was a Democrat. People up here hated Democrats. And it took me a long time to kind of swing to the other side. But I ran 5 times. I didn't make it. It's okay. but I still stayed involved in every major issue that came around in League City. I had something to say about it, and I went out and worked for them. I worked for other candidates, etc. But this last time was really kind of a funny story. I was in Texas City one afternoon with a bunch of people from that church down there, and we were plotting and scheming to get a Catholic men's conference put together. Now, that was the time that we had members of council walking out on American citizens because they looked different from them. It smacked of all the garbage that went on in the 20th century. And I called my wife and I said, I just don't think that's the way we ought to. I don't care that we disagree, but you can't walk out on American citizens, belittle them to the point that they don't want to come forward and talk to you. So while I was sitting there, I'm a rather religious guy anyway. I sort of felt like the Holy Spirit wrapped me up and said, you know what, you ought to listen to your own advice. And if you're going to complain about something, do something about it. Don't sit back and do nothing. So here I am on my fifth time to run for a city office. I went down that afternoon and I filed to run. And I told my wife, we're going to have some fun. We're going to go out and meet everybody. We're going to go on and on and on. And lo and behold, we made it. And so
what year was that?
The first objective was to settle this city down. Yeah. I mean, you just can't keep your credibility there if you're fighting all the time. So we did, and we moved forward. And, even my time in West Texas pretty much taught me that, even though I was there in Odessa, which was a war zone for anybody that wasn't 100%, mojo. But it was a great learning experience. People has always been my business. I always said I wasn't the smartest guy on the block, but I could talk a good line to anybody that got in front of me.
And so how many years now have you been mayor?
Well, I'm going into my 7th year here, and this is probably going to be it for me after this term, which will be in 2022. And I've let everybody down at the city know that. I haven't announced it publicly. I guess I have today, but it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. 4 years ago, I lost my leg. 3 years ago, I had double pneumonia and barely made it. 2 years ago, I had COVID. I was in for 5 weeks up in a hospital in Houston. And while I was sitting there, I was plotting up on the ceiling, when everybody in my family passed away, trying to figure out how much time I had left. And I kept thinking, my wife deserves something better than to have me die down there. So, we're talking about, I'm retired anyway, for the most part. And so is she. And we got family all around the country, and our kids are around the country. We'd like to see them. So,
Well, Pat, just can you remind me and remind our viewers, what is the current population of League City?
Well, we are somewhere between 115 and 120,000. I think the census listed us right at 115, but we've never stopped growing. And we anticipate in the next 20 years, we'll be at build out, which will be 250,000 people projected. And we know where they're going. We know what's coming at us. And, the only concern personally that I have, the city's going to do okay. But we have been for the last 30 years on this reduce the tax rate cycle. And there comes a time when when the city gets through growing and the amount of revenue coming in. Now the governor's closed off our ability to use our values as a tool to move us forward. And, in the next 20 years, it's going to kind of play out that we're going to have to really squeeze down to make the city work. It'll be long after I'm gone, but that's okay. We're on a good ride right now, and 250,000 people are going to the southwest side of town. We had 3 major landowners out there and 6,000 or 7,000 acres all the way to Alvin, out 517. And we know what's going in there. As much as I would have liked commercial development, the truth is home builders came and tied that land up early on. And they're already started on their neighborhoods out there. And that will double the size of League City.
Well, Pat, you indicated, I believe I heard you say the city of League City, maybe 250,000 people, 250,000 people at build out. Sounds like you're a little over 100,000 to that expected number. And we all see it, but transportation is a major challenge around here. So what do you see on that front for the city?
Well, let me tell you, we're working hard at that, and we put a lot of programs in place. Our internal transportation is almost at the point of becoming a reality. Maple Leaf, Bay Area Boulevard, Landing Boulevard, and Hobbs Road will go from 518 all the way down to Highway 6, and it will cross the Grand Parkway, which is our major hope. They tell us that 66% of our population, working population, goes to the energy corridor on the northwest side of Harris County. A lot of that is driven by NASA's cutbacks over the last couple of years. They found a home in oil and gas. Well, good for them, but they got to get there. Irrespective, I-45 will not carry the burden of the growth of Galveston County. It just won't. We're seeing it go to 8 lanes today. And, in the next 5 years or so, they're going to be all the way down to the island. So we know that's going to be there, but anticipating the growth coming, we have to find another way. Here comes the Grand Parkway. We have fought for that for the last 6 or 7 years. We're up at the Highway Commission regularly, letting them know what our issues are. It's back on the funding. We're probably 2 years away from them starting on that because, frankly, the Grand Parkway has gone through a little bit of changes. There is no more Grand Parkway Association, which was a privatization effort to get it built. TxDOT has taken it over. And, the agreement amongst all the cities was every penny made off that Grand Parkway on the tolls would be reinvested to the point until it was completed. Now, if you go to Kemah, you see what they're doing coming off of the Fred Hartman Bridge. They'll have that done down to 646. We're already in the construction process from Fort Bend County over to I-45. It'll take a few years to get that done. And the only part that's not funded is from I-45 to 146. That will give us not only east, west, and central corridors to get out of here when a storm shows, but will also get us to the work centers in and around Houston. So we're excited about that. And, our internal, we did that with a bond issue here a couple of years ago to extend those roads so they would cross the Grand Parkway so that people had north-south thoroughfares to get on. Landing Boulevard will cross the creek. Bay Area already crosses the creek. And so we'll be using West NASA 1 as an opportunity to get people up on I-45 that want to go that way. But if they don't, if they're going to the port, they can take the Grand Parkway around. If they're going to the energy corridor, they can take it around to the west side. And it has been truly a group effort from all the Galveston County mayors and councils to get this going.
Certainly nice to hear everybody's working together, municipalities and local government. Important.
We are.
And, Pat, you mentioned being from the Permian Basin. And as you know, I have some West Texas roots as well. So we both kind of know water, but we see transportation, but sometimes we just kind of overlook. It just is there when we're here.
Well,
I believe that's been some issues for our region and our area in League City. Can you fill us in on that?
Well, water had, of course, my point of view is water is at the heart of civilization, and you have to have water. And, when you look at a map of the world and, you look at the rivers and you go, why are all those cities sitting on a river? Well, there's a reason for that, because of access to water. Agriculture is still 70% of the water we use in Texas. And, we're having some problems today There's new reservoirs on the horizon, but the truth of it is water rights have been bought up along most of the major rivers. Dow owns most of them on the Brazos, and Houston owns most of them on the Trinity. And we got told early on in my term here that put your time and money into the eastern rivers. They're not as subject to drought as the western rivers, and so we've cut a deal with the city of Houston and Pasadena, which Pasadena has a purification plant, but that's Trinity River water. And Leak City right now, 85% of our water comes from the Trinity River. 15% comes from the Brazos River. Brazos is a lot more to clean up. That's okay. Cities around us are just now starting to wake up and pay attention to what's going to happen to them. And we're ahead of the game. Within the next 10 years, I hope we have that major pipeline coming down from Houston expanded, and we have sufficient water to keep us going into the build-out portion of Leak City. So it's important. We're on it, and now all we got to do is get it finished.
Okay. Well, Pat, let's talk a minute. You've described a high growth rate and looking at 250,000 people in League City when you get to build out. We discussed roads and transportation and water, but if we were ultimately to focus on the quality of life, the quality of life in League City, what you see now and where you see it being.
Well, I think just by the nature of where we're located, we're close to Clear Lake. We're close to the bay. We have the third largest, not us, but all of Clear Lake has the third largest boating recreation area in the country, according to boat slips. And, the quality of life is somewhat built in here. What's our role in that? We can't change the fact that we got all this water around us, but we'll take it. We have to prepare for all these things. We have to, we've got 130 miles worth of trails on the design board that's all being paid for the most part, by a 1/4-cent sales tax that we passed in this town almost 30 years ago, that goes to amateur sports facilities. It's a 4B tax, and we have a board that looks out for that. They're about 1/4 of the way through our 130 miles. You look at the parks that we have with gymnasiums. We just acquired 100 acres, or about to acquire 100 acres from developers on the west side of town. We're finishing out Bay Colony Park, which is going to replace ultimately the Sportsplex because it's just fulfilled its usefulness. And, we're hoping UTMB or somebody shows an interest in that 50 acres because it's pretty valuable today. But nonetheless, we are planning, our Parks Board and 4B Board are keeping current on the amenities needed for a growing population. Pickleball has become a big thing for older folks. We have our own leagues at Hometown Heroes. But when you look at quality of life issues also included in that, not only is water that I spoke to, but also transportation. And, government, my belief is, and it's an old Jeffersonian quote I use all the time, government's purpose is to do for its people what they reasonably cannot do for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I take that real serious. And I think the city has taken that pretty serious in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. We don't need to be in people's bedrooms making rules, but what we do want, and we do a great job of doing surveys around town about what do our residents really expect to have. And from that, we develop action plans. We meet every year for an action plan, strategic plan. And we have held pretty close to that over the last 5-6 years. And, League City's outlook is great. It's going to be, it is no longer Bubbaville. And, for a lot of your folks, you remember what League City was like back in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. But we have become as sophisticated, urban center, just like Clear Lake has. Our average house cost is $400 to $500,000 today. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what they do for a living, but they are coming, and the projections is that they're going to continue coming. Hold on, that's my phone. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't know how to turn it off. But anyway, League City's outlook is just great, and no matter who's up at the table, the truth is people drive what government can and cannot do. And, our people are pretty educated over here. Vast majority of them are college graduates, and even those that aren't are pretty smart. They're making it in business. We get hit with COVID and the other stuff, and we just have to react like everybody else. So, we're doing good.
Pat, let me ask you, you've been mayor now for 7 years. You've been in and around Galveston County for a long time. And let me just focus in just for a minute.
Okay.
On your experience as mayor over your period as mayor, as you're coming down towards the end of the current term.
Sure.
Over that time span, what do you see as the major achievements of you as the mayor and the city during that time period?
Well, my achievements go a lot farther than the city. You got beaches down there in Galveston, which I championed from the early 80s on and drove those things through the legislature with help of others, of course. But, I believed it could happen. A lot of people thought I was crazy at the time, but it has rebuilt the beach corridor with businesses. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that I put 50 facilities on the ground. At a time during the 80s when, money was tight, I found alternate ways to pay for it. And, no was never an answer for me. It was just an excuse for people that didn't want to apply themselves to finding solutions. One thing about government, as long as you're not immoral and you're not illegal, most everything else is fair game on the table. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of League City that every time we hit a stumbling block in 50 years, I have stood up for the good of the city. I love this city. Everything I have in life is payment on account for this city giving me my opportunity at public service. And so, I'm just proud as I can be to be the mayor. I don't want to say it's the highlight of my life, but you know what? I haven't had any other highlights that are much better than this. So I am eternally thankful that people put their confidence in me. I had to beg them, time after time, but they finally did. And I hope they're happy with the results. And I expect League City just to continue going on. It's a great town. We are 50. I always tell people, and you'll get a kick out of this, we are 56 square miles in size. 48% of that's still available for development. And San Francisco, which we think is considerably bigger, is only 49 square miles.
Yeah.
So we have the opportunity to be a good-sized city. We have the ability to have an impact with the development of the region. And we have lent ourselves to that, whether it was the Mayor and Council Association, whether it was HGAC and being on their board. We have always, over the last 7 years, had a voice. We had before, but really we weren't reaping the benefits as we are today.
Well, Mayor, we're kind of coming down to the end, but let me just throw out something, just a final deal. We talked about League City, where it's going and where it's going to be at build out. But, if you had the chance to look at League City in 20, 25 years, what would you want this city to look like in terms of mix and look and business and so forth?
Well, of course, I'd like to see a better balance between residential and commercial, because commercial is like profit to a city. You don't have to get the same level of service, number one. But number two, we have talked and talked and talked about maintaining the small town charm here. Our historic district was a whole effort for that. And I would hope that 25 years from now, that we were still considering this to be a small town, even though we're not a small town anymore. And that we elevate our thinking for our rightful place. You're right. You talked about us being the biggest city in the county, but the truth is, Galveston has been the center of intellectual and every other property for 150 years. And I think we have the ability to get there. Galveston is a little different. I love everybody down there, as you well know. I spent a number of years on that island and just fell in love with it. Janice is still mad at me that I didn't move down there. But, League City needs to take its rightful place through the region. And I think we have made a good start at that. And I look for 25 years that we will be a leader within the region to talk about what's needed, not just for us, but for everybody around us. And we'll do that in conjunction with our partners, which is every city in the county. I came to one of your economic development deals down there and spoke one day. Mm-hmm. And it was when Jim was mayor at the time. And I said, what's good for Galveston is good for us. Yeah. What's good for us is good for Galveston. So, the old saying is, or the old argument always was, how big a slice of pie am I going to take in League City? Am I going to reduce the rest of the world? And the answer is no. The real challenge is how to make the pie bigger so that everybody gets a bigger piece of it, so that we can all prosper. I'd like to see Dickinson and Kemah and Galveston, Texas City, Friendswood, all my friends on Highway 6, because I believe we are the product of location, location, location. And they are moving past us down to Dickinson today. I just hope they're ready for it. And Texas City.
Well, Pat, let me say, from the chamber's perspective, that's perhaps a valuable note to wind this all up on. We're all players in a larger community, and if we all work together, we'll all be better off. And I appreciate your wise words and your time. So thank you.
I appreciate being with you, Bob.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you, listeners, for attending, and that'll be about it.